Hello and welcome to this Destiny movie night live hangout. And in tonight's hangout, we're going to explore the movie Star Wars. And with me tonight, I have a participant. It's Yogan from Florida, Miami. Right? Hello, Yogan.
Hi, Victor. Hi, everyone.
So we're talking about Star Wars, and it's a very famous sixology. Six movies. I don't know why you say that, but anyway, a lot of movies that are famous. And short synopsis for those of you that haven't watched it or that have forgotten it. It's about, well, a Jedi Knight. Whoa, it's quite long movie to do a synopsis on. Anyway, how can I explain it? A young Jedi called Anakin is powerful. He turns evil. He's good at first. He's a knight. Turns evil. He has a son. The son is good. That's Luke Skywalker. Anakin becomes Darth Vader. Then they join different sides that fight each other, and in the end they fight each other, father and son, and they reach some form of forgiveness because they didn't really like each other. Yeah, and I think that's as good as I can do. So anyway, we're going to discuss this, review this movie from a different starting point than usually. We're going to look at it more from a self-reflective starting point, using introspective and sort of relating to the movie. And you can ask questions during the live hangout if you do have any to us, and we'll answer them to the best of our ability. Okay, Yoga. So let's begin. Now, I want to talk first about the sins of the fathers and how that is a point represented in Darth Vader, and how he sort of, well, can you take it from there? Can you explain what is the sins of the fathers and how do you see it in this movie?
Yeah, so the sins of the fathers is a phrase you find in the Bible. It refers to how, so how like the actions of the father is going to pass on to later generations, essentially. So the sins that you commit are going to pass on. In this movie, you can see how Darth Vader represents that point of, well, all this fear, all this anger, all this hate, a dark point where through his actions, through his inability to correct himself, he just continued the way he was. You could call him a monster in a way. He became a monster, and that's how he was. That's how he was, and he had a son, and his son, went through his own process, and he also had his own anger issues and fear issues as well. And he went through and faced it himself, the son, and his son corrected himself, and eventually they were able to, encounter one another. And there was this, at the end of the movies, there was a resolution where they were essentially, you could say Darth Vader let go of his anger, let go of his fear, and all that, all those points, made a different choice, and then you could say he changed. And that was through the support and through the example of his son, who even was willing to sacrifice his life at the end of that point, and being really an extreme example. And you can probably see parallels between the Bible, like Jesus sacrificing himself on the cross. That's a very common point that comes up in a lot of movies. So you can see that and how that relates to a kind of forgiveness, which relates to them changing and being supportive of one another. And at the end, they changed.
Yeah, so you mean like the father changes in the end? of the movie.
Yeah, yeah, and it's through the support of the sun. So that's why this is like an example of a movie where it ends in a positive note. Though if you compare that to real life, we usually just act out the patterns from our parents, right?
Yeah.
Where when we become a parent, we then think like, oh, I'm not gonna be like my father or my mother, but then you end up doing the exact same thing. And so in the real world, we don't actually go through and face our own past and given programming from our parents, and we don't correct those points, and we don't ever really resolve the cycles that have been occurring for generations upon generations. And so this movie is like a positive point where what it could be possible if we were to actually make that change and go in and face our fears, our angers, our hate, all those different points within us, and actually finally have a resolution, finally resolve them, uh, which is what we work through here at Destiny Courses DIP.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, I can relate to this point that as it is currently, most of us tend to, we walk through life, and what goes on inside of us is not something that we really look at or that we tend to. It just keeps on going, and then when it becomes too bad, maybe we go out and drink alcohol or try to find some other way of suppressing these experiences. But there are actually ways in which we are able to support ourselves to get through this. And we don't have the opportunity as Luke Skywalker to fight with lightsabers and do that kind of things. So, Jogan, have you any example from your own life where you have supported yourself to actually look at some, a point that you could see as a sin from your fathers and changed it?
Mm-hmm. So yeah, so like you were saying, Star Wars is a movie, and we don't have lightsabers, we don't have the Force, there's no Jedi's around, and those, to actually make it practical within our lives and in our context. So you just imagine like get rid of all that special powers, all the special technology. You just have people that we have, well, like we have today. We have governments, we have societies, we have wars, we have fighting. So it's the exact same story we've always had. And on an individual level, so yeah, so I mean, through DIP, I work through different points all the time, and some of these
So,
points
so what is the DIP, for example? If you
Oh yeah.
Can you take, for example, can you give an example of something that you've seen that, wow, this is like, here I'm doing like my father or my mother. Have you seen something like that?
Yeah. So I was saying that when I was listening through the DIP, I noticed that my patterns, a lot of my source points of my mind, where I was involved early childhood experiences, where it would even just be the most simplest of moments, right? These really simplistic points, but that's what happened, whether it be how my maybe I don't know, like some fear point, like seeing some scary movie, with my parent or with someone else, or like how just how you relate to different people when you're a young child. All those different experiences, how you react to those experiences, that's sort of what you carry on within you as a memory, is how to respond. So seeing my also on genetic level as well, I can see different relationships within how I approach certain situations based off the examples. And another way to look at this too is in your language. Whatever language your parents speak and how well they speak or how deep their vocabulary is, that it's going to determine your own vocabulary as well. So
Yeah.
even that point for me too, I've been expanding as well. So it's really like there's so many layers, many different dimensions that when you take it whole and whole, you are basically a product of your parents and your environment.
Yeah.
So it's like identifying all those little individual points from thoughts, emotions, feelings, and even just vocabulary, like physical abilities and information, you know?
Yeah, I mean, it's fascinating. For example, if I look at my own process and what I've seen within me, I can see that, for example, I have this tendency to be quite hard on myself in terms of taking care of responsibilities in relation to, for example, career or studies or things like that, or doing things the proper way. And what I have been able to see is that this is sort of a pattern that I have internalized and sort of inherited, that is actually the same in my mother. It's
Mm.
what she does. So, and it's interesting because through that I have been able to sort of look at my parents and then see, okay, my father does like that. So I mean, where am I doing a similar thing? And then sort of use that to get to know myself. So I mean, let's move on, and I'd like to talk about the aspect of Luke Skywalker as the hero in the movie, because undeniably he marches through the movie and is this protagonist, the main character that have all the attention. He has some side characters, but he is the guy, you know, that it's all up to him. So, Johan, what would you say about this particular way of looking at a story, of seeing it as there is a hero, and that guy is the most important person?
Yeah. So through my research, I saw that this story archetype of like this one guy saving everyone or being a hero, it's related to an old Icelandic, I think they're from Iceland, or somewhere like there, Scandinavia, where it's like the Vikings, right? There was this saga of the tale of these Vikings, and it always involved like a male character who was going through all these hardships and like having victories. And throughout the years, of course, this is pretty much all of our stories involves a male protagonist who goes through hardships, maybe gets in a relationship, you know, and all these different points. And yeah, I mean, even as if you look back in the Greek stories, the Iliad, you have Achilles, right, who is like the main character, like this great hero, great warrior. So it's really embedded in our culture, and this story uses that very common archetype, but it's very effective all the same. You know, that's how we respond on an almost unconscious level, where we almost glorify or deify or make a god out of these people, and we then, you know, in a way become worshippers and become fans, and we love these people, and that you can see that with our society with celebrities and you know, pro football athlete players. You know,
Yeah.
everyone is famous, singers, etc. Um,
Yeah, there is definitely this culture of following, and it's interesting that when we see someone that is really effective at something, you know, it might be someone that is genuinely confident or that is genuinely passionate about something, and we see that it's, you know, it's something quite unique that this person had, that what we tend to do is to follow and sort of go into this state of inferiority instead of asking ourselves whether we're actually able to create that ourselves, or look at how we can take those characteristics and sort of look at how we can express them as
mhm.
ourselves. So I mean,
Yeah.
would you say that you've seen the same point?
Yeah, so very rarely do we actually do that. I mean, in the Bible, you have Jesus Christ as an example, but how many people actually apply his words, like the golden rule? Do
Yeah.
unto another how you would want to do unto yourself. So, yeah, ideally, that's what we should do. And people who do live that life, even though they are rare, but you can tell that they become almost supernatural or superhuman because they're only doing what we're all capable of doing, but we're not doing. And so then they become, in a way, greater than because they have those capabilities. They develop themselves in ways that we usually don't believe we can. And so, yeah, in the movie, we could have the point of I guess sacrifice where you're willing to sacrifice your life for someone else. So that kind of point as well, where to actually, I'm not talking about like, not like actually like a martyr sacrifice, but I'm talking about like in a very practical way, like if you commit yourself to some end or some goal, you're gonna have to make changes and sacrifice something, sacrifice some time in order to really bring that goal about. And so to have that level of commitment and is something that for some reason is very rare and almost supernatural. But yet people who are that committed are usually end up people that are very successful businesses, successful lives because they were able to put the time and effort to make their life the way they wanted. And you can see that in the movie when you have a hero, he usually is very committed to his goal or his mission.
So, do you have any example from your own life where you have seen something in another, and you said, "Whoa, that was a cool application. How can I express this as myself? What could I do to bring through a similar sort of presence?"
Yeah. So yeah, the Destiny material I think is the best point for that because throughout my life I've always seen like individual people, individual points, but I think that well, it's not I think, but when I first was encountered with Destiny material and Destiny courses, that sort of like brings in all the points that you need to be practical, to be effective, to have the tools to change who you are exactly how you want to be. So, I would say that's the most, for me, that was the greatest source, greatest area where I can actually draw upon to actually take those principles, those tools, that information, that material, and apply it in my life. And yeah, I mean, that's I think would be the best point. Even just writing daily, doing self-forgiveness, all those different points, tools. That's an actual process you have to go through in applying it and integrating it in such a way that it becomes, you could say, natural or more habitual, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, and I would say I remember being younger and maybe around 19 to 23 years old, something like that. And it was a phase in my life when I was extremely apathetic and lethargic. I really didn't want to do anything whatsoever. And what I then could see in some people in my world was this point of discipline, and how when they apply that discipline and consistency in their lives, they looked generally more satisfied with themselves, and also that they could create and manifest these really awesome things in their lives because they were disciplined and consistent, and they pushed through resistances. They made like a goal and they followed through on that. And so that was a point that I committed myself to develop, and look at, well, how does others live this? What can I learn and take from others and integrate in my own life? And so, and that is actually an interesting point in how it changes this dynamic of comparison, of jealousy, of competition, and instead of competing, it becomes more like a symbiosis, a form of synergy where you can learn instead of fight and be jealous. That is interesting. So let's continue here, and let's go to Anakin Skywalker and his fall, because Anakin Skywalker he becomes Darth Vader then. So what would you say was the reason that he became this evil bastard?
So yeah, if you watch the movie, I mean, in the three movies, you can see how they're very clear on why he became Darth Vader, went to the dark side, and you had that famous line. I forget how it goes, like from fear to anger, anger to hate, hate to something like that, where he, through that fear of losing his mother, which is what he had as a child, he went through that experience of losing his mother, and that went through all this anger, and he ended up killing all these different people that were responsible for killing his mother. But then, through all of that, he had such a tremendous fear of losing people that were close to him that he was essentially turning to the dark side in order to get that power, in order to prevent that from happening with his wife. And so, from there, he actually sought for that power. He actually needed it, and the Emperor, the Palpatine guy, he saw that, and he took advantage of that so that he can use him. But Anakin was looking for that point because he's so much in fear, and so he ends up throwing everything away so that he can protect his wife, forsaking everything he's lived, so that he can get the power for that point. And he even ends up in the third movie like fighting with his mentor, someone who's really close to him. And then in the end, he actually ends up killing her, in a way, his wife, through simply, not even physically killing her, just simply by changing so much. She died because she lost the will to live, because of that emotional reaction to seeing him change so much in that way. And so that's kind of like an ironic point, but sort of showing you a lesson in a way of what happens when you so consumed by your fear of losing, of loss, and you actually end up losing the thing that you fear losing. And that's kind of like, there's no really, the moral of the lesson you could say is to not really have that fear of loss and not really follow it, but be practical and actually consider practical reality, not simply be within your fear,
Yeah, so his fall was fear.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's it's interesting, and we talked about this earlier, how you can sort of look at what happened to Anakin and compare it to what tends to happen to many that go out in the system and start creating a life for themselves. And I'm definitely one of them, where there is a process that starts happening where slowly but surely we lose parts of ourselves, because we carry around with these fears and these emotions and various experiences, which makes us lose sight of sort of our potential, our genuine expression ourselves, and instead that becomes replaced with the opinions of others, with the fears coming up, and suddenly we start making these decisions that really aren't what we want for ourselves, but we are not able to see that because we're so consumed within these experiences. And in relation to that, Jogan, what would you say would be of an assistance and support to sort of get yourself back to this practical reality and looking at things without all these various shit going on in your mind.
Yeah, so I mean, that's directly what we work through with Destiny, through Destiny tools, Desteni I Process, the courses. So, I mean, I would just be explaining those tools directly, but so yeah, it's like writing we have as a tool, which is used because of, well, I would say the first step would be to first breathe, simply to give yourself some stable grounding point so that you're able to work in reality. And writing is able to be support because then you can look at what you wrote, and what you'll notice is that you'll see things in your writing that you didn't see originally when you wrote it down, which is why I think writing is so useful, because it adds that kind of like a permanence, a way to have a platform which to really read and really understand what it is that you actually went through. So, oh, sorry. So, yeah, I mean, I would say just investigate Destiny courses, and that's really the best investment, I think, for anyone's time.
Yeah. Yeah, and for those that aren't aware of it, the Destiny courses are courses that are focused on self-help, where various tools are utilized in order to get out of the mind reality and into practical physical reality. And as Jovan mentioned, one of these tools are writing, where you write out what goes on inside of your mind. You have it before yourself, you can see it clearly, and from that point you can take responsibility for it, forgive, and create solutions and corrective actions so that you can live a life that is more grounded. Okay, so yeah, and one more point that I'd like to discuss is this thing of sort of trust the force that is mentioned throughout the movie. And what would you say that this point is symbolizing and representing?
So, I would say it's related to kind of like a spirituality, kind of like a feeling of there being a presence, feeling like there's a God there, so that within that feeling you feel a sense of security, a sense of comfort, which gives you, I would say, a false sense of confidence, because it's really just your point of belief and your point of, it's like almost you want to be so much in your mind's reality that you are trying to find a kind of power within your beliefs, wherein you actually then separate yourself from the actual power, which would be your physical body, your actual physical reality, which is how you actually create and make things happen. So it's very much related to God and spirituality, trusting the unknown force, having almost like magical powers in a way. And yeah, it's like the theme there.
Yeah, like religion.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so it's interesting what we can sort of see in the movie now. It shows to us a little bit of the programming that we hold on to in relation to feelings, for example, that come up, that we should trust something outside, something that comes up, trust the force. And I mean, it can also be related to, for example, trust the feeling you have, trust your gut instincts. It's a little bit of that same touch in it. And it's interesting that we seldom ask ourselves, okay, but why can I trust myself? And what is this myself? Well, it's not a feeling. Myself would actually be reasoning commonsensically around the point, or simply being here and directing oneself according to what comes up in the moment. So, I mean, that is a point that I've found is really cool to develop, that point of bringing the trust back here to myself and realizing that I don't need a feeling, I don't need an experience to actually make decisions, to see what is best for myself and my life. So let's bring it to here tonight. But before we let it go for tonight, I would like to ask you, Jogan, what is it that you see we can take with us from this movie? Like, what would be sort of what you're able to learn from it and apply in your own life as well?
Yeah, I mean, I always try to take what's good from any point, right? So, in general, I mean, I don't know, I think that for a lot of people, especially, for most people, they're going to be able to relate to the third movie, or not third movie, the Return of the Jedi movie, like the last one in the sequence. Yeah, the sixth movie, wherein Luke is going through the training with Yoda, and all that points. I think, I don't know if it was the fifth movie, sixth movie, I forget, but like those movies where he's training with Yoda and Yoda's like, giving him instruction, and there's that famous phrase like, what was it, like,
do not try. Do.
Yeah. Do or do not. Yeah. Do not try. Do or do not.
Yeah.
Wherein that's like a true statement in a way where you either, and whatever happens, you either end up doing it or not doing it. So it's kind of that point where you realize that you kind of have to put everything you got into something, and if you don't, then you're going to realize later on that, well, I didn't give 100% or 120%, I didn't give everything I could, and that what happened didn't happen. So it's that point of simply going for it with everything you got, the kind of absolute, I want to say, power, where you actually go for it. And that's a cool point that a person can apply in their lives, wherein whatever goal they may have, to simply, give it their all. And then, most people, they don't actually apply that point, which if they did, then we would have many more, I guess, satisfied or successful people. But that's one point.
Yeah, that was a cool one. I also agree with that statement that, well, there is no try. Either you do it or you don't. And this point of trying already implies an acceptance of failure, that almost like a preparation of failure instead of doing it.
Yeah. You notice too, though, it's within how a person lives the words as well. Because for me personally, I grew up with the word try as a very much like, I'm going to try my best. It was always like that point of actually giving my best, like my absolute point. So it really ends up, when you can tell when a person speaks also, when they speak a word like try, whether like, oh yeah, I'll try it, It's like, they're kind of, you can hear the resistance, right, within a person's voice. Wherein you say like, yeah, I'm going to go for it and try it, You can hear that the person's actually going to go for it, So it's also how we define the word as well, like how we live the words, and our relationship to the very words we speak. And what ends up happening is that we end up doing it in an unconscious way, in a subconscious level, where we have all these definitions for all these words we've created over our whole entire lifetime, but then we forget that we're not aware of that. We assign those definitions, and then those definitions end up becoming what we end up living throughout our whole entire lives. And I'm realizing that we're creating our whole lives, and we've created it many years ago. We're just living out a pattern of a definition, of a word. That's kind of funny. It's like, yeah, that's come to.
Yeah, so I mean, that's a entire topic in itself. What the power of words in essence, and how the definitions we all of words, whether we are aware of them or not, is actually creating our life here on Earth. But anyway, so let's take it up to here tonight, and thank you, Jogan, for walking through Star Wars with me.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
And next week we'll have Joanna. She's going to do a hangout with the movie Återträffen or Återträffen, and in English I think it's The Reunion. It's a very interesting movie Swedish movie as well that I suggest everyone to watch. Okay,
Yeah.
so until next time, bye.
Bye.